All right, welcome back. Y'all know who I am, Caroline Best, founder of the Tao of Horsemanship and Dream Riding Partnership Program. I'm also the host and founder of Everything Horses and More podcast and Wisdom of Tao, the path to or path of um, alchemy flow, basically. Okay, so today this is a random podcast meeting. I'm going to be talking about a bunch of different topics and sharing my experiences as a professional horse developer, trainer, and my thoughts. And why I wanted to do this particular podcast is because I've been paying attention. I'm always paying attention to what's going on around me, and whether it's on YouTube or social media, etc. And what I've been seeing over the last year, even more than that, probably the last maybe 2 years, but especially this past year of 2025, is an increase in professionals in my industry. I don't know how to put it. It's an increase in their sharing posts about their personal experiences, of course, and views and perspectives on some very common training practices, for the lack of a better word. And I'm going to bring up some of those. I outlined them in the podcast post. So I'm bringing up a couple of areas that are common, that have been around for a long time in horse training, and some principles or sayings that I've created myself based upon my experiences working with these more traditional, conventional training principles and tactics. And I'll make more sense as I'm going through all of this. But getting back to what I've been noticing this past year, I'm just an observer. I'm not here to criticize, but I also have to let you know that it doesn't sit well with me, that I get an icky feeling, for the lack of a better word, when I am being an observer of some of these posts, not all of them. And these posts are by some very popular professionals in my industry, by far more popular than I am. And and it's an interesting, their commentary, their ideas, their perspectives are, some of them are interesting. And I don't agree with them. And I will tell you why. I'm not going to be bringing up anybody's names. I will be sharing some of their quotes, but I'm not going to be, I'll let you know when it's their quote, their words. I won't be sharing their name though. But I'll tell you why I find it uncomfortable and for me. And I'm coming from the perspective of my experience with thousands of horses over the years, and the confusion that I see in my students when they come to me, when they are also seeing these posts, or they're going, they're trying different trainers or different videos, and they're seeing this way of thinking perpetuated, and why I think some of it is doing a disservice. It's just really interesting. And there's two words that have come up, and I've given this a lot of thought, you guys. I've been thinking about this for months, and some of it is alarmed me, and to the point where I've wanted to say something on the post as a professional, but I haven't. And I've just been sitting back, which is kind of new for me, if you know me. I'm pretty straightforward, and I operate from a lot of common sense and a lot of experience and a lot of study. So I guess anybody can say that about themselves, right? When it comes down to it, it's always what's in our own head, or our own perspective about ourself. But what's alarming for me is some of these posts are very they're virtue signaling and self-aggrandizing. So So again, I'm seeing a new trend in my industry on social media that definitely alarms me with either position. And let me give you guys a definition if you're not really sure what virtue signaling is or self-aggrandizing. So self-aggrandizing behavior involves exaggerating one's own importance or power or achievements, often through boastful and self-promoting actions. This behavior can manifest as constantly redirecting conversations to back to oneself. It's just basically seeking constant praise, or I think validation is more the point that I'm seeing. And maybe because social media just keeps increasing in its how do I want to put, putting it out there. Like people are more and more on social media, and they're posting more and more. So maybe I'm seeing some of these professionals perhaps want to be validated by uh, not so much, they're not bringing up anybody else. They're just really want to promote themselves as I even feel funny talking about this because I could be in the same category right now when I talk like this, promoting themselves as they know best. And, I could say the same about myself. And I can remember just recently one of my newer students talking about this. She's like, Caroline, why are you Dow of horsemanship? That's such a really difficult, nobody can even pronounce Dow, and it's such a long name. And for a marketing expert, you're not really good with your marketing or how you're branding yourself. And there's a lot of truth to that, I will admit. It's so hard to work on your own work and your own horses. You either never have time for your own horses, you never have time for your own work. It's so much easier uh, to take a look at someone else's work and help them. So definitely, I have weaknesses in my own branding. There is no doubt about it, and I don't have time to do a better job. I'm doing the best I can being by myself and hiring people here and there. But this person also wanted me to turn my name into Best Horsemanship because Caroline Best. And I mentioned to her, because she was not familiar with my history, that I used to be rider horsemanship and I was always Dow of horsemanship. That was the brand. And and it was incorporated, but I was rider horsemanship when I first came out because it was such a obviously a catchy name, right? And my married name was Ryder, Caroline Ryder at the time too, and I'm like, this is just perfect. But when I got away from rider horsemanship so many years ago and made myself Dow horsemanship because that's where my heart is and that's what I always wanted, it was just so woo-woo-y 20 some years ago, so I kept rider. It was just easier as a clinician presenting. But anyway, and then I remarried and my last name is Best. And I was asked, by quite a few people, oh, you're going to become Best Horsemanship. And I'm like, no, I just I find that very arrogant, for lack of a better word, just really arrogant. No, I'm not going to be Best Horsemanship. So where I'm coming with this, stay with me. I'm not just rambling. I'm always trying to come back full circle. Is like that would be to me self-aggrandizing, where I'm the best, and sure, I think my method works. Yeah, I will say it. I think my method works the best. I do, time and time again. And that's part of the reason why I'm bringing up some of these random topics is because I don't agree with these perspectives of some of our leading experts in my industry. I don't agree with all of their perspective. And they have not spent as much time as I have learning what I've learned. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter as far as, you could have someone that's been studying horses for 50 years, but just isn't that great with them. And you could have somebody that's been studying for less than 10 years and just has a natural, knack for understanding horses and a natural eye and and a feel for it. So I'm not saying just because I have so many years of experience, that definitely has a lot to do with it. I've worked with, thousands of horses. but it's also the how I've worked with them and the things that I have figured out along the way, to me, work best for the horse. And when I say work best for the horse, what am I looking for in that perspective, or that paradigm, or that lens? What am I looking for? Okay, the path of least resistance. I really want to make this the best learning experience for my horse, and one that works with the way they learn, and also helps us grow together in partnership, and not in a mechanical or forceful way. So that's where my perspective is. And sure, I'm going to say I think it's the best. I think it works the best for horses. And sure, I'm going to say I think my program is the best. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not criticizing anybody else for feeling the same way. That's not where I'm coming from. But just be careful when you're out there reading posts and looking at other videos. Because there's a new trend coming. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if if people need more validation, feeling insecure. There's a lot more competition. I get all that. But then there's the virtue signaling. So again, it's very similar. Virtue signaling is the public expression of opinions or ideas that are intended to demonstrate one's good character. Particularly on social and political issues. So the term is often used despairingly to suggest that the expression is performative, self-serving. So just be careful when you're reading stuff. I'm passionate about my work, and one of the things that I say all the time to my students, and whether it's on social media, uh, in my online courses, is where is the balance of everything? And nothing in life is completely balanced, but we're always searching for a balance. And why are we searching for a balance? Because it feels right. And what I mean by that is any extreme behavior, anything extreme in life, look at addiction, anything extreme is an imbalance. And so when you look at nature and you look at a horrific hurricane that comes through, and that's an extreme weather disaster that comes through, but after it balances things out, um, with weather, so to speak. So I'm always looking through the lens of where can we find balance or regain balance. And when I see extremes, in behavior, extreme actions, something is off balance. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. And when you study horses, oh, I have a mouse in my office. Let me open my door. Oh my gosh. Come here, little guy. Oh, okay. Hopefully he gets out. I will have to work on my mouse population. It doesn't help when I feed one of my feral cats cat food in the barn. They should be getting the mice. But anyway, just putting this out there for you guys to think about. And my success with my work, the way I work, if you like it, then you'll know that I'm all about finding that flow and finding that balance. When things don't feel right within us, when they don't look right between us, how can we come back to balance and flow? And so I'm just putting it out there. You guys can do what you want with the information. Um, just step back and make up your own minds. And look at the full picture. Look at science, look at common sense. How does it feel? How does it resonate within you? The horse will never lie. How do the horses look? And how does it feel? So one of the first topics is about pressure. And gosh, I'm always bringing up pressure because it just never ceases to amaze me how we are still using the pressure, um, in a way that is not in the best interest of our horses. And so there's been a lot of posts going back and forth, and some of the people that I follow And I don't follow everybody, but the algorithms pick up who I pay attention to. So the people that I'm paying attention to in my industry, they're also following each other. So they're all kind of feeding off of each other and commenting on each other and supporting each other. And I don't support some of this, the way it's being explained in the horse industry right now by some of the professionals. So pressure and release. I think it's safe to say that most of us that are interested in the kind of horsemanship that I'm teaching, which is a holistic horsemanship, a relationship-based horsemanship, um, pressure and release is not something that I teach, but I want to say that pressure is always there though. And pressure and release is definitely a traditional, more conventional way of training. And I'll read the definition of it, but it's still very strongly used, even in some of the more natural horsemanship discipline, the natural horsemanship discipline. And it's even being used by one of our leading professionals in the equine industry, one of the most popular at this point, uses it. It's one of his main principles of training. And I'm going to just share with you why I don't agree with it, but I have a 1% rule. Okay, so let's talk about pressure. And again, this particular podcast is just for educational purposes. You're going to get my opinion. My opinion is based on experience. My opinion is not based on emotion. It is based on experience, proven time and time again what has worked, what has not worked. And for all types of horses. I started out as a rehab specialist, not a riding foundation specialist. I became a riding foundation specialist and continue to refine my riding specialty. The foundation's there, that's in my big program, but I'm always learning, obviously, always a student of the horse. But as far as rehabilitation, I know my shit. Hand me any horse, and it doesn't mean I'll be able to make changes immediately because it doesn't work that way, but I'll be able to tell you in my assessment of the horse what I think is the best path forward for that horse, which of course can change depending on where that horse is at certain times of its rehabilitation. So I'm going to start out with saying there's nothing wrong with pressure at all. It is how you use it. And again, pressure is a constant in our life and in so many different forms, and it is a constant in the horse's life, whether they're wild or domesticated. And I'm going to talk about the different ways wild horses use pressure, which is similar to domesticated horses, but domesticated horses are forced to live in our world. So they have so many more forms of pressure than a wild horse would ever have to deal with. So here's a quote from one of the professionals out there, who I like. I agree with this one a lot. Those who misunderstand pressure will find themselves trapped in its constant overuse. Pressure exists everywhere in nature. For example, your physical presence next to a horse creates pressure. Absolutely. If you don't understand how this pressure affects a horse, you will likely find yourself caught within pressure lines, whatever that means. I mean, I understand, but this isn't me speaking. You can think of it as energy, which I do, and it is registered scientifically as energy. Ideally, we should work subtly with energy to create drive and draw with horses, leading to a flowing dance that is intuitive to them. I agree. Many people push and pull on a horse simultaneously with their energy, unintentionally asking the horse to move forward while providing no clear direction. And actually, I'll add to that, they hold the horse. And I see this all the time in my work when I'm working with new students or students who have signed up for my big program and they're trying to understand how to push and drive the horse out and around them. And the biggest factor when you are pushing a horse out and away from you, driving them, the biggest piece of that energy is your focus, your eyes, your intention, the power of your intention. And, this is, we're predators. Predators are very laser focused, very linear. They see it, they go after it. That is how we are hardwired. So it's really hard for humans to follow a focus or change their focus, especially when they're working with horses, because we just get so laser focused. And it's not good. It's not good for the horse, and it makes us very linear. And when you really understand the nature and psychology of horses, they are nonlinear, meaning, as a prey animal, they're designed to look for every way out of a situation. And so to me, that's where so many people get in trouble with horses when they're either training a young new horse or they're rehabilitating, is they push the horse so much that the horse starts choosing ways of getting away from that type of pressure. And then they get shut down. We shut the door or we punish them for choosing that way out. And that is such a negative and so wrong and unhealthy for the horse. It's just wrong. It's a huge concept. And we as humans don't even realize we're doing it because of how we're hardwired. And it takes a lot of practice being aware of where you are when you're working with a horse like that, that's either new and learning and doesn't understand, or a horse that's constantly triggered and in a lot of rehabilitation. Is, we don't help the situation when we just keep going after it. We're just adding more and more pressure. So this is where I see people, like I said, are pushing, trying to learn how to drive and lunge their horses. And yet they are constantly focused on the horse. And you can't be, because the power of your intention, your eyes, it's so strong. It's either scaring the horse if it's not confident or familiar with you, or it's holding the horse. So it's no different than when you take a riding lesson. I think everybody has heard this, learned this. This is universal language. Look where you're going when you ride. Don't look down. Everybody says that. Doesn't matter what discipline you practice. Everybody knows that. It's so different than when you're lunging a horse. In the beginning, you're not looking at them. You need to teach them how to follow your focus. You need to open that door of energy and channel it between you and your communication tool, the lunge whip, and the horse's body, as you guide them and teach them to follow that energy field. An energy field is open, not locked, not blocked. Open it up and allow them to go through. And then you can refine it. And yes, you'll be looking at the horse and the body for biomechanics, healthy biomechanics, and developing healthy biomechanics, but not in the beginning. So this is where people really don't understand, as a trainer, as a professional, you're learning, you're not there yet. So you don't understand the power of how much you're pulling and drawing the horse back in by looking at them. Um, and so that's an intuitive thing that is natural for horses. So it's like when you are doing a lot of liberty and you're drawing your horse in with positive energy, you want to look at them and you do want to, pull them in, to your chi, to your chi power. There's no doubt about that. Okay. So let's get back to this paragraph. Many people push and pull on a horse simultaneously with their energy, push and pull. It's very conflicting and confusing to horses. And then you don't know why the horse doesn't move, or you don't know why the horse tries to run away from you. So unintentionally asking the horse to move forward while providing no clear direction, and mixed messages, mixed energy. They convince themselves that they aren't using pressure, yet they continually block and push the horse, often teaching tricks and cues through repetition instead of through feel. Pressure has become a misunderstood term, and many people who are afraid to use it actually end up overusing it without giving the horse any relief or education regarding it. I agree with all of that. It takes a certain level of awareness and I always say to my students, film yourself. Now you can buy these little $10, $9.99 iPhone jacks or whatever holders that you can just wrap around a fence board or your round pen. And it may not be able to follow you, but at least if you're far away enough and you stay within a small enough space, it'll capture everything, and you can really get a good idea of what you look like and why your horse, it really helps you and why your horse does what they do. So pressure and release, the definition, it is a fundamental horse training principle where a trainer applies a gentle pressure, so to speak, a gentle pressure to ask for a behavior and immediately removes or releases it when the horse responds correctly. This is a form of negative reinforcement, and this is the definition, you guys, where the removal of an aversive stimulus is the reinforcer, teaching the horse to understand the desired response to avoid pressure. Effective application requires clear communication, starting with the lightest pressure and increasing it gradually, and perfect timing to release the pressure at the exact moment the horse offers the correct behavior. So I am so against pressure and release, except for this 1% rule I'm going to share with you, because number one, it gets abused, and it's not on purpose. Just most of you, you're not professional trainers. You haven't spent a ton of time with 1,000 horses, okay, trying to figure out what's the best way for a horse to learn. And this isn't the best way because you're creating a conditioned response. It's a negative and positive reinforcement that creates a learned behavior. There's it and through repetition. So it's not real learning. And I'll explain what real learning is. It really isn't. And most of the time, unfortunately, it creates learned helplessness in most of our horses because by nature, horses are passive. Horses are not aggressive and they are not a dominant. They are passive by nature. They choose to get along and they choose to work together. And and so that's intrinsic in horses. Okay, that's natural in horses. So most of them are always going to choose because they're passive. Most horses are always going to choose learned helplessness. And then you get the few stronger personalities, or just that are more sensitive that are going to go into flight mode, or the stronger personalities are going to go into defensive mode, which is fight. But they're not the majority. Um, so while pressure and release creates a certain type of learning through habit and conditioning, and how many of us can go through habits without even thinking about them? So there's not a lot of thinking when you form a habit. This is not the same as real learning. So I'm going to bring up Dr. Stephen Peters. I follow him. He is phenomenal. Thank God for him. He is like our leading expert in the equine industry for neuroscience and bridging the gap in horsemanship and learning for horses. He is just phenomenal. If you don't know who he is, look him up. So he explains that horses learn best through consistent communication and by creating an optimal state of arousal rather than excessive repetition. Key principles include avoiding punishment, which triggers a fight or flight response, and using a clear, congruent signal that aligns with their natural sensory motor learning style. So allowing for rest periods, which is called dwell time, I teach all about this, is crucial. Allowing for rest periods is crucial for memory consolidation. And let me tell you, some of these rest periods can be days and weeks, you guys. It's not just a rest period during that training session. That's important too. Dwell time is so important to make sure that our horses are in a relaxed nervous system, and where we see stress releases like shaking, licking and chewing, which is also processing, not just a stress release, but it's also a processing mechanism or habit, or not habit, but behavior, and yawning, of course. So one of the things that I've learned, and I have deep regret, it is the biggest thing, and maybe the only thing I have the deepest regret for, is how much repetition I put on my Trinity, my original 3 horses, without realizing how damaging And none of this was talked about 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. And I was following natural horsemanship at the time because, by God, it was a revolution and better than the traditional abuse and forceful training methods. But that, and I'll talk a little bit about that too later in this podcast, but that also becomes harmful, especially when there's so much repetition. And so getting back to Dr. Peters, allowing for rest periods is crucial for memory consolidation, while a balance of appropriate challenge and safety. And what he means by safety is the horse feeling safe within their nervous system. So we want enough arousal that the horse becomes interested, but not triggered, and not so that they end up in a dysregulated nervous system. So safety allows a horse to stay engaged and focused through the release of beneficial neurochemicals like dopamine and epinephrine. Yep, epinephrine. And so while I didn't know about Dr. Peters until 4 years ago, I've been developing horses this way since I made horses my career 25 years ago. And this is based on my personal experience suffering from acute panic attacks and coming out of them, and knowing how valuable meditative breath is, and doing just the learning about the human nervous system and the hippocampus area of the brain, and how we release endorphin or cortisol, just understanding what triggers us, what triggered me, and how to get back to a regulated nervous system. So all of my work has always been around that, because as a behavioral specialist, one of the things I was learning so much of is how dysregulated, and I didn't use that term because that term wasn't around 20, 25 years ago, but how dysregulated so many of our horses are. Most of them do not operate it from a safety place, a regulated nervous system. And this is key. This is why we get stuck. This is why, if you're not able to progress and reach you and your horse's potential easily, and you keep getting stuck, this is why your horse has a dysregulated nervous system. And I'll talk more about that. So the issue is that managing pressure demands a sense of feel from us, and a sense of timing, and a sense of awareness, which can only be developed with experience and being present. So it goes hand in hand with slowing down. And slowing down, this is like the battle in horse training: slow versus push, rush, and fast. We still have so many trainers out there who are rushing the horse's learning experience, and starting them way too early. On a cognitive level, I still can't believe it's like, in the quarter horse futurity, these horses, like the race horses in the thoroughbred industry, are walk, trot, and canter, and sliding stops, and spins, and rollbacks, and flying changes at the age of 2. So, they're getting these young horses at 18 months old to into their first few months of being a 2-year-old, and they're putting like 90 days or 6 months on these horses. And it's too much on them, on their bodies, and, on their minds. And, Lord knows that's what we're doing in the racing industry. And I think the jumping industry has a little bit more sense, because they've ruined so many horses with jumping at such an early age, especially with kissing spine. But I'm telling you, my experience in Italy 5 years ago with and I'll bring up wealth, a very wealthy client outside of Rome who was she's an equine advocate, and I admire her tremendously, but she was buying up as many of the NRHA, pro stallions and mares who were winning around the world. She was purchasing them to get them out of the industry, and not only create a breeding program and retire them, but also trying to change the industry as far as the age of competing, taking it from 2 to 5. And she was being hit, as she explained to me and my dear friend Janine that accompanied me on this week-long um, trip. She was buying her way in a good way to change uh, the way reining horses were being trained and in the ages, mostly because of the age. And this is a big uh, battle, and battle's not even the right word. It is a battle, but it's a big discussion in the horse racing, thoroughbred racing industry is, why are we racing these horses so young? My first experience with race horses was when I first got back into horses and started after my 2 year sabbatical and learning and studying. Then I started to work with any horse that I could get my hands on, and I slowly got a really good reputation going for my area in Maryland. And this local thoroughbred breeder who also raced her horses came to me, and she had a 5 and a 6 year old sisters, filly mares, and who had never raced. And that was my first time developing them to then go from me to the Baltimore. This was amazing because I was able to trailer them up to, one of the most a multi-million-dollar breeding farm in outside of Baltimore, Maryland, but also a training area. So they would take the foundation. I put 90-day foundation on these two mares, and it wasn't like the foundation I teach today. I mean, nobody was going to be trail riding them, but they did get trail ridden, but they went through everything that my program offers with a lot of cantering, just a lot of cantering and finding that dirt road and let's go. And so then I trailered them up to this beautiful estate where they would then they had cross country course for these thoroughbreds. They didn't drill them. They just didn't make these thoroughbreds run every day on the track. They had hills, big hills in Baltimore, and they had an outdoor cross country course. And so they were going to figure out what these two girls were really good at, thanks to their owner. May not be racing, it may be eventing. So that's why I put the foundation on them so that, they could move off the leg and they could move to the seat and they could supple, and, they were getting the balance and the strength for the self carriage and the collection. And then this facility was going to decide, with the owner where they were best suited, but they were also going to race. They just fit into a different category for racing because they were older. Why aren't we waiting for our horses to grow up? It doesn't mean we can't train them. It doesn't mean we're not handling them. But the training should be age appropriate. Why isn't this just mandated? I don't get it. And it blows my mind because if you talk to everyone in the horse industry, it doesn't matter who you are or what you believe in, everyone will say, I love my horse. And of course, I want what's best for my horse. But science proves that it's not in your horse's best interest when you do X, Y, and Z. So, yeah. So the issue is that managing pressure, the issue at hand for all of you is how you manage pressure. Don't be afraid to use pressure. And I'm going to explain, excuse me, again, why pressure is everywhere, you guys. Our domesticated horses can't live in a world without pressure. But you must understand the nature of horses and what's basic and intrinsic to them as a species. So they're always using pressure. It's just how they use pressure. And a healthy horse is going to use it in phases. They're going to give a warning before they make contact, whether it's a bite or a kick. And so that's a hard thing for everyone. I think it's like art. It's so subjective. What we see, is what we see. It's not what everybody else sees. So you and I could be looking at the same thing and we could see something completely different or very different. And I wish there was more of a baseline when it came to developing horses, a baseline curriculum, but there isn't. And the baseline curriculum to me would always be what's in the best interest of the horse. Whether it's their age or their rehabilitation, what is in the best interest for them, and how do we move them, like do an assessment. How do we assess them where they're at? And if we want to, can they get to this place? And if they can get to this place, how do we get them to that place? And without further harming them. If anything, how do we get them to that place so that they feel great, that they're healthy and they have well-being. And that's always in the back of my head. So someone else wrote, if you're going to use escalating pressure, the purpose should be kind. I agree. Unemotional. Healthy horses that use pressure to communicate and guide and lead, there's no emotion. They're assertive. They're not aggressive. It should be unemotional and used to only help them get to the other side faster so they can feel better quicker. I totally love that. And what does this person mean by getting to the other side faster? She just means, how do we help them regulate their nervous system? So you can use pressure. I'm going to get to this 1% rule. I'm going to talk about using pressure in various different forms and reasons, but how do you use pressure to get them from shutting down all the time, staying stuck? How can you use pressure with a really hypervigilant, overreactive horse so that they end up feeling safe? You can use pressure in both of those extreme situations where you have a shutdown horse or you have a severely, the other extreme, emotional reactive horse. You can use pressure to help them get to the other side quickly so that they feel better in their nervous system, so they feel safe, so they feel like they have control. That, what does it mean to feel safe? That their body releases endorphin and dopamine, not cortisol and adrenaline. It can be done, but it is a masterful approach. This is not something that any of you are going to be good at, and that's what infuriates me with horse training. There are no quick videos to teach you how to do this. You've got to be mindful. You've got to follow, I'm not here trying to promote my work, but I do have a step-by-step. I do teach you how to develop yourself, develop your horse, and develop your horsemanship all at the same time in every lesson, so that it's a full circle approach. You're constantly working on you. Where am I? What does my horse need? And how do I develop my skills, my horsemanship, so that I can make this possible and I can make it a good experience? It's not always good sometimes, and sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. You wouldn't know this unless you study with somebody like myself. That's something that I've repeatedly said to my students the last couple of months since September, is you can't possibly know what I know, so don't feel defeated and don't feel frustrated. You're here to learn, and I'm here to guide you. So you're students of my program, and you need to take advantage of the curriculum and the steps and my coaching, whether you're here in person or it's long distance. You can't do this alone. The things that we are faced with our horses today is we are overfaced. You all are overfaced. There is no way, and I'm so sick of the smoke and mirrors and the bait and switch out there where they want to tell you, I have the technique, I have the quick fix, I have the solution. There isn't any for rehabilitation. And that brings me to that 98% of our horses are fucked up on some level, just like us. So that means they're going to have triggers. Something's going to trigger them. And a horse is either going to choose one of their self-preservation modes, or they can go through all three. Most horses are going to choose one. And it's usually, as I said, a passive. They're going to usually shut down. Then they might go into the overreactive mode, and then they might fight because they've had it. They're frustrated, they're confused, and they're defensive. And it really hurts me when some of my students come to me and they perceive their horse as kicking out at them or pinning their ears or the snake neck, and they perceive that as a bad attitude, that my horse needs to get their attitude adjusted, or they're being a bitch or brat or dominant. And we do the virtual coaching, and I take a look at the video and I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't understand, you've misread this completely. Always look for the path of least resistance, and it's always your fault before it's the horses. We're so quick to blame them. And so, most of the time they're just being defensive because they're not being heard. And here we go back to pressure. You have no idea what kind of pressure you're putting on your horse by just walking into their space. What are you holding inside of you? Because that's all pressure. There's all sorts of energy going on inside of us. And if we're not aware of our own state of being when we take it into the presence of our horses, my gosh, um, just wow. There's so many things to think about. So most people, because we don't have the experience of feel and timing and awareness, we don't have it. We want it. Cognitively, we can think we have it because we're thinking about it. But the reality is, until you get into the presence, the space of your horse, and you actually try teaching them something, or you both are learning a lesson together, you don't know how good or bad you are until you see it working or not with your horse. It is that black and white. So if it's working really well, and then you have the support of your mentor telling you that it's working really well, it's not just you thinking that, then yeah, you got some good feel and timing and awareness. But if you keep hitting a wall, you've got to get help. There is no quick video out there because they don't have their eyeballs on you. What's quick help? It's not another freaking video. It's virtual coaching. Find somebody that you look up to, that you trust. And if they don't work out, then go to somebody else and say, can you assess this video of me and my horse? This is what we're attempting to do. Even show them another video of a professional. This is what we want to do. Why isn't it working? We keep hitting this wall. Go get help, you guys. You're not going to get it with one video. The percentage of you that get it in one video is very slim to none. That's just the way it is. This is way more complicated than you give credit. And I'm here to support you. You're not supporting yourself by thinking that, oh, I've been there. Believe me, I've been there. Oh my gosh, this looks way easier. And then you try it and it's like, what the heck? So most people end up flooding their horses. And this still is normalized in training. And it just blows my mind, the level of repetition that horses go through. And again, that is my biggest regret, is how much repetition I put my Trinity through and didn't realize how damaging it was to their joints at a young age. 2 out of 3 had horrific arthritis. And, yeah, they were started before me. Yes, they were rehab cases. I get all that. They were run into the ground as 2, 3, 4-year olds. I get that. And that could have been most of the damage. Okay. But I still took them and was practicing with them 5 days a week. It's too much. So we're still flooding our horses. We are rushing the experience, and we're pressuring our horses into conforming or submitting. And we're not listening to what the horse needs. And it is an art. It's like the art of communication. Oh my gosh. When I'm working with people, human beings, and I'm coaching them, or we are doing one of my workshops, this is something that none of us are good at, is communicating. The art of communication. How many of us have grown up in a household where we were taught how to communicate how we felt and listen, how to share and how to listen and how to understand, interpret how we felt. What does that mean? What do we do with those feelings? None of us, me included. It took, my therapist when I was in high school from my panic attacks, it took, 2 years of therapy before I went to college to help me process the emotions that were making my nervous system shut down, or get overfaced and overwhelmed, which is an anxiety attack. And then, understand what was going on. And there's my experience with the nervous system. That's how far back it goes for me. That's why I've been doing this work for so long. But also how to start communicating in a family dynamic that chose alcoholism over communication. That was their form of, my whole family, my brothers, my mom and dad, that was their form. I didn't drink, not at the time. I didn't drink till I went to college, and I felt like I was in control, and I was not being influenced or going to add to further damage in my family. Uh, but yeah, it's how many of us know how to communicate? So if we don't even know how to be healthy communicators, in our own human family, friendship, partner dynamic, how do we even know what that's like with horses or how to communicate? They do it great. They know how to communicate until we take that from them through domestication. But, this is the problem with pressure is it has been normalized, this pressure and release. Students come to learn the fine art of riding here with me, the subtlety, the subtle aids, the connection of energy and focus. And, they're I'm teaching them suppling with my schoolmasters. So my horses understand what a feel and contact is in the hand, and how to trust that contact no matter where it guides them, and how to hold that contact until we release it. And so most of my students come for the first time because they've been taught this. This is so universal out there through natural horsemanship more than anything. You have one extreme, and then you have traditional where they just hold on and grab and mate. But then you have this natural horsemanship that came along and started teaching, well, we're going to ask for contact, and as soon as the horse follows it or gives, we release. Okay, well, in rehab cases, yes. So you don't get flipped over, reared, flipped over. Sure, we'll start out there. Absolutely. But eventually, you're teaching the horse how to handle contact, how to handle contact, and how to trust contact, but they can only trust it if you're being fair with the contact. It's much more complicated than you think. Um, so getting back to escalating pressure and what does that mean? So I look at it like escalating pressure just means you're adding pressure. Um, my question is when is it appropriate to add pressure, and why are you adding pressure? Those are the two questions. When is it appropriate, and why are you adding it? So it comes back to this 1% rule that I have through rehabilitation, that when a horse is one extreme or the other, they're severely stuck or they are panicking and overreactive. You've got to match that energy if it's not dangerous. So with the reactive horse, you want to match energy, but not to the point where it makes the horse escalate. That's the feeling, timing of that. I've had students who misunderstood matching energy and end up blowing their horses, and their horses try jumping out of round pen panels. And you can only imagine they either crash into them or try to jump over them. So that's not what I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about, running the horse around until they absolutely are, dripping in sweat and breathing heavily and submit to you. Okay. So when you have a really shut down horse, a lot of people are like, I don't know how to get my horse to do anything. They won't move, whether I'm, with riding, if your horse is really dull and you're trying to rehabilitate them. I don't, the riding is just going to be a trigger. It's always go back to the ground, work with the nervous system and build from there so that when you get back to the riding, they have a new connection with you in a healthy way and in a relationship trusting way and in an energetic way so that when you do apply pressure, it has a whole new meaning for them and it doesn't just re-trigger them to shutting down and being really lazy or slow under saddle. And for the horse that escalates and is easily reactive, as long as the horse isn't escalating, we're going to match that energy. But this takes time. And so if you've got a horse and you've never done anything like this, you're going to take your time to feel your way around with how much energy you can add. And even if we're not talking about you getting to a point where you can free lunge the horse at a big working trot and manage that energy and help them get to the other side. That would be for specialists like myself, but you could still put them online. Oh, my poor internet has not been good today. You could still put the horse online and hold their hand, as I say, in the round pen where you've got some structure. They can't think that they can just pull you, run sideways 100 feet. But you can use small increments of high pressure and take it away. So, but the release is used differently. The release is you're adding pressure with no emotion and taking it away and you're looking for them to react positively. You're looking for them to either get comfortable with that or a horse that's really shut down to respond to that. It's not about pressure and release in that way that I'm going to put so much pressure on this horse until, and only release until I get the desired behavior. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about applying pressure, knowing how to escalate the pressure, applying it and taking it away completely and figuring out how much you need to apply to get the horse to be present, which would be the horse that shuts down because they check out. Or for the overreactive horse, you're doing it until the horse can get comfortable with that pressure. And there's a lot of other variables that I add while doing this, like talking. I'm grounded. There's so much energy work. Um, I'm talking to the horse to try to keep them present, to help them feel obviously the tonal quality that's coming through, how it's resonating. Here's the heart coherence. There's is your body relaxed when you're doing this, or is it tense? Are you stressed out? So there's so many variables to this. This is why you can't just follow a quick fix or a video. Horses are not designed to be mechanical. They will be, they'll have to fall into conditioned responses through repetition and positive and negative reinforcement. I mean, they're passive by nature. So most of the horses are gonna fall into some level of submission. And it's just a shame because you break their spirit. So the 1% rule for me is that 1%, I'll use it 1% of the time. If I have a horse that's really stuck, then I might add pressure and keep the pressure and add a little bit more. So we call that escalating pressure. I'm adding pressure until I can get the horse to come out of this stuck mindset, this learned helplessness. And as soon as I see that try or the horse show a different, healthier sign that, hey, I'm here with you, I'm not on autopilot, or I'm more engaged with you, Caroline, then I will release. Absolutely. And again, the release isn't to teach the horse that that's what I'm looking for. The release is to help the horse's nervous system come back down so that they can process what just happened. So the release is used completely differently. My 1% is really about the pressure and the amount of pressure, the severity or the addition of pressure, the escalating pressure that I will choose to use to help that horse in either extreme, get present again, and not only get present with me, which means they're trying to connect to me, then bring that nervous system back down. So horses use pressure all the time, as I said, as a means of communication. The key difference is that their approach is immediate and straightforward. I call this the one and done. That's the other topic, the one and done. When you watch healthy behavior, it's always warning the horse is fair and has follow through. So they've already given the subtle signals to the other horse, like I'm coming to take that pile of hay. And if you don't move by the time I get there, I'm going to make contact, whether I bite you or kick you. So it's a one and done though. Unhealthy behavior in horses is aggression. So that means they chase the horse and they run the horse down. So you don't see that with wild horses unless it's stallions. But you don't see them running mares down or mares running mares down or running the babies down unless the stallion's gonna kill the baby. But usually they kick them or they break their neck. So this running, our domesticated horses that run each other down, wow, that is displaced behavior, coping. I mean, that horse is a bully. Horses are afraid. That's not healthy and that's not normal. So it's a one and done, and that's what I teach in my work is that we have a phase system. It's the power of your intention, you getting really good at projecting your energy, holding your energy, and pulling your energy back and away. You got to learn how to play with that. But energy, everything starts with energy. Okay, let's just use this for groundwork only right now, including lunging. Then it's a get that clucker really strong, not the snoot, clucker. Okay, let's get their attention. That's a second phase. The third is more rhythmic. It's not steady pressure, it's rhythm. Fourth is we're making contact. It's a one and done. So whether I take the lunge whip and pop goes your chest or pop goes your butt, then we shut everything down and we decompress and process what just happened. Because if you make contact and the horse takes off at a trot, then they're learning that every time you make contact, it's to go. And making contact is not to go, not in my method. And that's not the language of Equus. Making contact is take me seriously. What did I just do? And what am I teaching you? That's why you shut everything down, the entire lesson. When you have to make contact, you stop immediately and you give dwell time. See if the horse can process what just happened and regulate their nervous system, because of course it's going to be heightened at that point. And then you go through that lesson again and you see how much easier or not it is for you just to use energy and the power of intention without stacking your phases. So in the horse world, this is about respect. So the horse that's respected might have to do the one and done. They might have to make contact. If it's done appropriately, fairly, with follow through, which is your phases of pressure and signals, then that horse is deeply respected. And that's where we need to be. That's what we need to learn. And my God, this passes over and into raising kids, training dogs, cats, everything. Every highly intelligent social species understands this. It's part of the way they manage and organize their groups. If they live in a pack dynamic or a herd dynamic, any type of group dynamic, there's got to be social organization, you guys. Okay, with social organization, oh gosh, wow. With social organization comes this type of communication with pressure. So let's talk about how horses learn. And it's not through pressure and release. Let me back up. They'll learn to a certain level, but it is a habitual habit. It's a conditioned response. Like I said, we can multitask and not be present. We women especially, we're designed to multitask. So, you know, we can do things second nature and not think about them. I want a horse that's thinking, that's developing neural pathways in their brain and strengthening them. Okay, that when a horse thinks, they respond. A horse that doesn't think reacts. Horses that think don't rely on their instincts 100%. They actually are elevated. They're elevated in their cognitive development. It takes them to another level of consciousness. They actually think and can problem solve. So we want horses where you develop and strengthen the brain games, cognitive development, neural pathways. You want to keep strengthening those because they will override their instincts. So this is again what makes my method so powerful and safe, not to mention the connection that the horse has in their nervous system and how your nervous system is connected the same way, not to mention you've created this amazing bond and trust with them. So we're talking about how horses really learn. So real learning, just like us, can only happen when the horse is present, engaged, and able to digest and process what they're learning. And how often are our horses rushed and pushed and overwhelmed, overfaced, flooded with either stimuli or pressure? And anytime we flood their nervous systems, they go into their sympathetic nervous system of self-preservation to some degree. Like I said, all horses are damaged, just like we are. It just depends on you know how deep the damage is. So neural pathways in the brain are interconnected networks of nerve cells, neurons, in the brain that transmit signals, enabling functions like movement, sensation, memory, and learning. These pathways form through repetition, yes, but not too much repetition. You know, we want to repeat things so that, yeah, it does become second nature to a point, but not to a point where we tune out. Through repetition and can be thought of as roads in the brain, pathways in the brain. The more a path is used, the stronger and more automatic it becomes. You see what I'm saying? Here's the science behind it. The more you strengthen the horse's neural pathways in their brain, the more you get them to think and learn, not just go through the motions and be on autopilot, then that will override their natural instincts for fight, flight, or freeze. So they are dynamic. Neural pathways are dynamic, a property known as neuroplasticity, which allows the brain to form new connections or reroute signals in response to new experience or injury. So remember, a horse can't learn just like we can't learn unless we feel safe and open to learning. And safety for horses, just like us, is always found in our nervous system. So if we have a dysregulated nervous system, then we're stressed, we're having panic attacks, we're overwhelmed. You know, it's any kind of extreme sensation or behavior. When we have ease and flow and peace, and we're thinking and we're feeling and we're not overtaxed, we're in our regulated nervous system of rest, calm, and digest, just like the horse. And that is the only time we can really learn. So in the end, what's the hurry? Who's making this rule? I'll tell you who's making this rule. Professionals out there in the equine industry who are breeding horses or selling horses. Horses are expensive. Oh my gosh. The longer you keep a horse, the more money it costs. As they say, the cheapest part of owning a horse is purchasing them. So, breeders want to put these young horses and I've seen it time and time again with my students. Breeders, most breeders, not all breeders, there are some great ones. Um, but a lot of breeders are just, putting these young yearlings and 2 year olds into training just to get them out, get them sold or get the beautiful movement, whatever that breed specific movement is, whether it's jumping or high stepping or whatever fanciful movement, whatever that bloodline is supposed to bring them. Um, and then you've got the trainers. How many of my clientele over the years, very few have been able to afford to keep their horse in training with me for 6 months and longer. Very few. Whether it's just foundation training on a young horse or it's rehabilitation. And most of these horses needed rehabilitation. So they needed a lot more than 90 days. And I was a minimum 90 day. I was never any shorter than 90 days unless it was a schoolmaster that needed, that knew the horse itself um, knew plenty of technique, but needed a different approach. And even then, sometimes it took a lot longer than just 30 days. Well, what is the hurry? And all my students out there, they lack a community except for the online community that I provide, but there's nobody in their barn. They feel ostracized. Why aren't you riding that horse? And why aren't you kicking that horse? And you should have a bit in the horse's mouth. And it's just, always to me and this is all over the world. It always comes back to what's in the best interest of the horse, and but anyway, there's a lot of pressure out there. I feel for all of you trying to live, do right by the horse and be true to yourself. I really I feel for you. So again, if you question the use of pressure and release, just look at healthy herd dynamics. They use it all the time, but it's in a one and done. It's not in the way we manipulate pressure and release. We're going to keep putting pressure on that horse until the horse does what we want, and then we release. Well, then the horse is always going to look for that release too. It's just like they're always going to look for that treat or that cookie. There comes a time where that'll work. That's kind of that 1% rule, but that means that's not what you should be doing all the time. You've got to teach the horse and small increments how to accept and trust pressure and how to work with whatever level of pressure that is, whether it's contact through your hands and fingertips, or it's slight pressure of the seat or the leg, or you're on the ground and you're using rhythmic pressure to drive and guide the horse around you. So let's get to behavioral science. In equines is a scientific study of horse behavior, scientific study, including their natural actions, social interactions, learning, and how they respond to their environment and humans. It is a multidisciplinary field that combines veterinary medicine, psychology, and animal behavior to science to improve horse welfare, training, and management by understanding the link between their emotions, physical health, and behaviors. So I'm all for behavioral science. Oh my gosh, yeah. It's also kind of revolutionary, but it's still in its infancy. Um, so I'm always a student. I am always researching, and I love to stay linked and current with what's going on in social media so that I see what's going on. That's why I'm having this podcast. But I want to learn too. Is there something I'm missing, or is there something I didn't think about? And you know, behavioral science is in its infancy. The greatest person to follow right now is Dr. Stephen Peters, hands down. He's a leading neuroscientist for humans, and now he's a leading neuroscientist for equines. He is by far the leading expert in every way. And so when I say it's still in its infancy, except for him, be careful what you read out there. And there are so many trainers out there using science on a very rudimentary basic level. And it doesn't work that way because horses are emotional beings, and they are complicated because they are emotional sentient beings. They are complicated just like we are. And because they're so sweet, they allow us to do so many harmful things to them. When you think about it, most of our horses are just shoved into this type of training where they have no voice, they have no freedom. What are the three F's, basic needs for horses? Freedom, friends, and constant forage. And they get none of that. We do so much to them. And I'm bringing that up because the basics of behavioral science, which is now like being included in every trainer out there, including myself, but I'm not included in this aspect, is they're just covering the basics though. And they're still using conditioned response, negative and positive, reinforcement. And horses are much smarter than that. And if you really want to be safe with horses, you've got to develop the brain. Well, you've got to develop the nervous system. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the nervous system's connected to the brain. So you've got to develop that. That's the first place, period. And you need to stay there. Um, And again, behavioral science, any kind of science, can be a very linear, it's just the nature of the human brain. It's a very linear, approach to studying horses. There's a lot of scientists out there that study horses, but they're not horsemen. They're not horsewomen. And I don't just mean studying. I mean also, do you have experience applying this to horses? So, how many vets are out there that love horses and have horses? But it doesn't mean they're great with horses. It doesn't mean they know how to train or rehabilitate horses. Just because you love the horse doesn't mean you know what you're doing. Sometimes I think our egos just get in the way. It's just crazy. I know they do. I know they do. Um, so just keep that in mind when thank God for behavioral science, just like thank God for natural horsemanship. And that's my next and last topic. Thank God for that. But it's not the end all to be all. It's keep, not keep searching, but just keep open to what your horse is telling you, how they never lie, how do they show up in what you're trying to teach them or what you're asking them to do? How do they show up tells you whether it's working for them or not, period. So natural horsemanship, my next and last topic here. Um, so when I came back into horses, that was the first place I went, and I was absolutely, positively blown away and happy. It was such a revolution to traditional conventional training methods. But when I when I finally took the deep dive and spent 3 months in it every day, and with one of the leading expert in natural horsemanship that defined natural horsemanship, where it became an actual discipline, um, the honeymoon was over. Honestly, the honeymoon was over. And so, when I left after my 3 months, the best part of what I learned is what I didn't want to do. So, there's nothing natural about natural horsemanship. Okay. That whole term is from a marketing master who coined natural horsemanship. But this marketing master took it from to me, the guru of liberty, the one and all who started liberty with horses and understanding wild horses and training in a way that supported the way the wild horse dynamic worked. And that would be Carolyn Resnick. Yep, absolutely. So to me, real natural horsemanship started with Carolyn 50 years ago. She was the original Liberty and the original horse whisperer. Okay, so hold on. That's the woman. This is just 50 years ago. Let's go further back to Ray Hunt, and let's go further back. I don't really know, I don't really like what I saw of Ray. I'm going to go back to the Dorrance brothers and go back to Xenophon. So, and some of the great masters in dressage. But if we're talking about the United States, and right now we're going to go to the godfathers of horsemanship and natural horsemanship or peaceful horsemanship or gentle training methods. I think everybody can say, yeah, we agree that it goes to the Bill and Tom Dorrance, definitely. And then I'm going to add to that Carolyn Resnick, absolutely. And then Pirelli came around, and that's who I studied under. And I did a little bit with Carolyn Resnick as well. But Pirelli, he learned from Carolyn and he learned from the Dorrances. You know, they were the ones that started it, but they didn't necessarily try to market it. You know, Carolyn became popular with her Naked Liberty book. That's how I found her um, out in California so many years ago. So, you know, these guys weren't out there trying to market it, you know. And no offense to Pat Pirelli, he revolutionized it by making it mainstream. And thank God for that. But it's a slippery fine line and a slippery slope when you start marketing yourself and that's all you care about is how you market yourself. And because it's kind of like selling yourself your soul to the devil. You really marketing, you guys, and you're talking to somebody that had a marketing business before I got back into horses, and I do all my own marketing, but I'm not out there that much. You know, you just it's a fine line. It is a bait and switch. It's a smoke and mirrors. What is advertising? What is marketing? You're out there constantly trying to prove to everyone else that your product or your service is the best. I mean, that's the bottom line. And we all, including me, step into that when we market ourselves. Now, there is a point in marketing where you're just trying to bring awareness. Absolutely, trying to bring awareness. Um, so natural horsemanship, there's nothing natural about it. So the biggest problem with natural horsemanship is the micromanagement. And, you know, there is no, to me, I've never seen real connection in any certified instructor of natural horsemanship. I've never seen real connection. Sure, I've seen lots of really cool stuff that's been done. And I'll take that back. There are a few of them. There are a few of the older generation, my age and older, yes, that came into the natural horsemanship in the very beginning and they're doing a fabulous job and they're an honest job with it and they have a great relationship with their horse. But I'm talking about unfortunately what's been normalized. Okay, let's just stick to what's been normalized and thrown in everybody's face. And you have to be really careful because of the level of micromanagement that these horses are forced into and the level of criticism that becomes punishment. It's so punitive, and you don't even realize you're criticizing the horse, but you're not allowing the horse to express themselves or do anything wrong because you're trying to correct it constantly, which is really criticizing the horse. And your inability to allow the horse to show you what they know or don't know, or what they like or don't like, your inability to allow that is micromanaging. Um, and so what horses really need when you're training them is number one, co-regulation. They need to be able to regulate. Nobody can learn if they're not feeling safe within their nervous system. Bottom line, just remember that. They're going to go straight into self-preservation mode. And horses are smart and quick learners. So just because they pick up a pattern, because you've repeated it so many times, they've eventually realized that that's the only way for you to leave them the fuck alone. And that's how you create learned helplessness and horses that go on autopilot. They're like, well, I've tried everything else and you shut me down, you punished me. And so now I'll do what you ask, but I have no feeling. You break their spirit. So remember to keep things natural in your horsemanship. Remember, every horse is an individual. They're an individual, you guys. What does that mean? That every horse learns differently. It doesn't mean you can't teach horses the same thing. It doesn't mean they can't learn the same things, but they're going to learn differently. And it's our job as a teacher to understand what that horse needs as a learner so that they learn and it is a positive experience so that they want to continue to learn. What is try in a horse? Everyone keeps coining it the yes. How do we get a yes out of a horse? I'm so sick of making up all this shit. It's the same shit regurgitated or told differently 1,000 times. The yes horse, the no horse. The no horse is a horse that's not trying. The yes horse is a horse that's trying. How do you get a horse to try? When they feel safe, when you give them a voice, when sometimes with the really shut down horses, they don't know how to try because it's been knocked out of them, run out of them. So you've got to help them trust you enough so that they start asking questions. 2 ears and 2 eyes on you. What do you want? Yes, ma'am, I got you. What do you want? So while science, specifically Dr. Peters, is paving the way to the truth of how horses learn, what they need as learners, um, which has nothing to do with them as an individual. It's just the basic psychology of learning. Remember that you've got an individual. What does that individual need? Then that's the nature of the horse. Then you've got nurture. What has the horse learned? What behaviors have they learned? Are they good or bad? Are they hurting the horse or helping the horse? Yet nature and nurture. And then you have physiology and psychology. So when you want to do natural horsemanship, when you want to keep it natural, you've got to consider your horse as an individual, what they need as a learner. You have to try to figure out their learned behaviors. Most people think their horse's behavior is actually who they really are, but it's not. It's a coping mechanism to protect them. It's what they've learned to survive in our world. So you've got nature, you've got nurture, you have physiology, which is the nervous system. It's, horses learn somatically. They learn by what they feel first, not what they think. So what they feel goes through their nervous system, which is attached to their brain. And that's what creates either positive or negative neural pathways, new learning or not. We're so detached from our bodies and our nervous systems, and we shouldn't be, that we just go straight to our brain. And then there's the basic psychology of horses, understanding how, like Dr. Peters, how do they learn? What do they need to be a healthy learner? Okay, that was a lot in just an hour and a half. I am always available for questions. So if anybody wants to leave questions here or email me, Caroline at taoofhorsemanship.com, TAOOF horsemanship.com. I'm here for you guys. All right. I hope that was interesting and educational. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. May you always be one with your horse, and see you next time.